When people study Japanese history, they mostly focus on the samurai and the shogunate periods. This is what we called the medieval era of Japan. Unfortunately, with so much focus on this historical stage, it is easy to forget that the country had a rich, ancient history before it. While much of Japan's ancient history before the 6th century AD is difficult to study due to the limited written records, what we do know indicates that it was as dramatic as other civilizations of the time. From the mysterious prehistoric times through the end of the Kamakura period in 1333, Japan witnessed the birth of agriculture, the rise of the imperial state, and the establishment of feudal warriors. In this video, we will trace the key political, cultural, and social transformations of early Japan from the Jomon period to the fall of the Kamakura Shogunate in 1333. However, in order to understand this, we need to briefly look at the unique geography of the country and how it contributed to the tensions at the heart of Japanese history. Japan is an archipelago consisting of 4 main islands: Honshu, Hokkaido, Kyushu, and Shikoku. There are also approximately 6,800 smaller islands stretching along the eastern coast of Asia. In the north, Hokkaido experiences cold, harsh winters and mild summers, contrasting sharply with the subtropical climate of the Ryukyu Islands in the south. Additionally, Japan is part of the Pacific Ring of Fire, which is responsible for its frequent earthquakes and the presence of many volcanoes. Among these, Mount Fuji is the most iconic, rising to 3,776 meters as Japan's highest peak. Japan's terrain is predominantly mountainous, with mountains covering about 73% of the country. This rugged landscape has historically limited farmland, which is found mainly in coastal areas. Consequently, many of Japan's cities and most of its agriculture are located in these narrow coastal plains. The earliest culture in Japan were known as the Jomon. As much as can be determined by archaeology, they lived in Japan from around 14,000 BC to 300 BC. Most of what we know about them were that they made cord-marked pottery from which the period derives its name. Jomon means cord-patterned in Japanese. This culture was focused on a sedentary hunter-gatherer lifestyle, which meant that they didn't have fixed settlements, a writing system, nor metal objects. As a result, it is incredibly difficult to know any great detail about them. The next period of Japanese history is known as the Yayoi period, which began after the Jomon at around 300 BC. The next 600 years saw the introduction of new practices and technologies from the Asian continent. In particular, the arrival of rice cultivation led to the development of permanent settlements. The use of metal also became prevalent, particularly with the introduction of iron and bronze tools and weapons. This technological innovation contributed to improved agricultural productivity and warfare tactics. Alongside these developments, the Yayoi people began producing distinctive pottery, which differed markedly from the earlier ceramics, characterized by simpler forms and a focus on function over decoration. However, the Yayoi culture also saw the beginning of regional conflicts, likely driven by competition for resources and land. These conflicts played a crucial role in the formation of proto-states, particularly in Western Japan. By the end of the Yayoi period, around 300 AD, distinct social classes and political structures had emerged. Next came the Yamato period, which spanned from around 300 to 710 AD. The Yamato court was able to assert dominance over other clan groups in Japan, particularly in the Kinai region, near modern-day Nara, Osaka, and Kyoto prefectures. The leaders of Yamato established themselves as the central ruling power, which was supported by a network of alliances through marriage and military conquest. One notable feature of the Yamato period was the construction of large burial mounds called kofun, which served as tombs for the elite. By the 5th century, the practice had become widespread across the region, symbolizing the growing power and influence of the Yamato rulers. Buddhism was officially introduced to Japan in 552 AD from the Korean kingdom of Baekje. This religious system was clearly not native to Japan and was viewed with suspicion. Furthermore, during this time, there were significant interactions with the Korean peninsula and China. Through these interactions, the Yamato court adopted aspects of Chinese culture, government, and technology. By the end of the Yamato period, in 710 AD, Japan had developed a sophisticated bureaucratic system modeled after the Chinese government. Most historians begin the discussion of Japan's imperial system from the year AD 710, when the Japanese emperor established the first permanent capital city in Nara. The city of Nara, modeled after the Chinese capital of Chang'an, was laid out in a grid pattern that facilitated the administration of the new centralized government. There was an increased focus on adopting Chinese cultural norms, particularly in the upper classes. This was solidified with the codification of the Ritsuryo system, a legal code based on Chinese Confucian law. In addition, the adoption of the Chinese writing system meant that the first Japanese histories were also written at this time. They were known as Kojiki and Nihon Shoki, and were completed in 712 and 720 respectively. However, they contain more legend than real history, but they became important because within them it is claimed that the Japanese emperor was descended from the gods. New Buddhist monasteries and temples featured prominently in the new capital city. The most famous was the Todaiji, which houses a gigantic statue of the Buddha. Its incredible size was indicative of the state's resources. This investment in Buddhism was intended to bolster the authority of the state. However, by the end of the Nara period, the growth of powerful Buddhist monasteries had begun to threaten the state's authority, prompting the government to relocate the capital to Heian-kyo in 794. This move was aimed at reducing the influence of the Buddhist clergy and is considered the end of the Nara period. The next stage is known as the Heian Period, which lasted until 1185 AD. This is often viewed as the peak of the Japanese imperial court's cultural and artistic achievements. The influence of Chinese culture waned, and the court focused on developing its own aesthetic and literary forms. In fact, the world's first novel, called The Tale of Genji, was written by Murasaki Shikibu, a lady-in-waiting at the Heian court around the early 11th century. It has survived and offers profound insights into the courtly life and culture of the time, and exemplified the era's literary sophistication. At the new capital city, at present-day Kyoto, the emperor came under the control of the powerful Fujiwara clan. The size of their land ownership meant that they could use their wealth to influence the imperial court. They also used strategic marriage to the imperial family to position their own members in important government roles. This led to a prolonged period of peace and stability, which allowed arts and culture to flourish. The Fujiwara enjoyed the height of their success under Fujiwara Michinaga around 1016. Michinaga wielded unmatched influence over the imperial family, arranging marriages of his daughters to emperors and acting as regent for his minor grandsons, thereby controlling the throne indirectly. However, after Michinaga's death, the clan's power decreased. One effect of their loss of control is that civil conflict broke out between the other clans. When Emperor Go-Sanjo reasserted the emperor's supreme authority in 1068, Fujiwara's influence was finally ended. 18 years later, Go-Sanjo abdicated the imperial throne so that he could manipulate politics in more subtle ways. This system of control was called the cloistered government, or Insei. Subsequent emperors adopted Go-Sanjo's model. Moreover, the Heian period saw the evolution of the Tendai and Shingon sects of Buddhism. These sects introduced esoteric rituals that became integrated into the court's practices. By the end of the Heian period, landowners hired soldiers, known as samurai, to protect their farms and houses from lawless bandits. Over the next few centuries, these warriors would grow into their own distinct social class. This began a new period where another powerful clan controlled the Japanese emperor, but this time it was the Taira clan. A second clan, the Minamoto family, initially allied with the Taira to expand military control over more of Japan than ever before. The Taira clan's most famous leader was called Taira Kiyomori, who dominated the imperial court between 1168 and 1178. As a result of his dominance, the Taira's former allies, the Minamoto, turned against them. The retirement of Emperor Takakura led to a power struggle between these two clans over the imperial succession. Then, after the death of Kiyomori, the two clans fought each other in the Genpei War from 1180 to 1185. It was primarily fought to decide who controlled the imperial court and, by extension, the nation. Both sides relied heavily on new samurai armies to seek a decisive victory. A gifted military leader named Minamoto Yoritomo became a decisive factor in the war and led his clan to final victory over the Taira. The Genpei War culminated in the decisive Battle of Dan no Ura in 1185. This naval battle resulted in a decisive Minamoto victory and the tragic defeat of the Taira, including the death of the young Emperor Antoku. Yoritomo then became the supreme military leader of Japan by defeating all other rivals. He was able to use his new power to manipulate the emperor himself. As a result, the emperor gave him a new title to designate his new powers, Shogun, which means Supreme Military Commander. Yoritomo set up a new Japanese capital city at Kamakura, which began the Kamakura Shogunate. Additionally, the Genpei War left a lasting legacy on Japanese cultural expressions, which celebrated the virtues and valor of the samurai class. As a result, the samurai ethos was firmly embedded in Japanese society. When Minamoto Yoritomo was officially appointed as shogun in 1192, he established the first bakufu, or military government, at Kamakura. This city was far from the imperial court in Kyoto, signifying a significant geographical and political shift. Now, the emperor's power was largely symbolic, with the shogun and his military government controlling the country. Under the Kamakura Shogunate, the samurai class rose to prominence. Moreover, this period saw the implementation of the shogun's military and judicial authority over the provinces, which was enforced by the appointment of stewards and constables. These changes led to the creation of a feudal system. During the Kamakura period, several Mongol invasion attempts in 1274 and 1281 were organized by Kublai Khan. Despite their numerical and technological superiority, the Mongol fleets were repelled, partly due to typhoons known as kamikaze, which devastated the invaders. These events increased the military reputation of the Kamakura Shogunate, but also fostered a sense of unique national identity and divine protection. This period lasted until the fall of the Kamakura Shogunate in 1333. This was caused by the Kemu Restoration, which was an attempt by Emperor Go-Daigo to restore full imperial rule. While it ended the Kamakura Shogunate, the emperor only held power for 3 years and inadvertently led to the rise of the Ashikaga Shogunate. But we will cover that in another video. I hope that you have enjoyed learning about the early history of Japan. If you would like to discover more about Japanese history, please visit the History Skills website to read all of our free articles.